You're listening to The Bird Bath. This episode of The Bird Bath is brought to you by Ignite Veterinary Solutions, creators of Kit Club, a monthly team meeting platform built specifically for veterinary practices. You know how team meetings usually go. Somebody's scrambling the night before to throw a deck together, half the team's checking their phone by minute 4, and by Monday morning, nothing's really changed. Kit Club is here to fix that. Every month, you get a fresh 30-minute session led by Kit, an animated guide who actually runs the room for you, with real vet med scenarios, built-in discussion prompts, and clear action items your team walks out with. DVMs, technicians, managers, and CSRs all in the same room, having the same conversation, finally on the same page. No prep, no slides, no scrambling, just press play. It's $150 a practice per month with a 30-day risk-free trial, so there's really no reason not to give it a shot, because stronger veterinary teams start with better meetings. Head to ignitevet.com or click the link in our show notes to learn more. Welcome back to The Bird Bath. Each week we scrape the surface of the news you need to know, so let's get into it. Big story this week that has been 13 years in the making. Texas is shaking up some VCPR laws. 13 years ago, Dr. Ronald Hines, who's a Texas vet, got hit with a $500 fine for giving pet owners advice over email without a hands-on exam first. He sued on First Amendment grounds, and after more than a decade of ping-ponging through the courts, the Fifth Circuit sided with him in 2004. Last month, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review it, and now that Fifth Circuit ruling stands. Here's what you need to know. The quick overview for you. It took 13 years and a trip to the Supreme Court of the United States to settle this $500 fine. The Fifth Circuit leaned into the 2018, what's called the NIFLA decision, which is a decision out of California, which was a Supreme Court case that said states can't strip First Amendment protection from speech just because a licensed professional is the one saying it. So it came out of a really politically charged piece around crisis pregnancy centers in California. So there's some extra kind of things to think about when you're citing this overall case. But the judge in the case for Dr. Hines said, the state's expert testimonies were conjecture and speculation. Dutch, who many of us know, the telemedicine platform, is saying this is a green light. They are talking about this as being a way for the entire telehealth model to open wide up and allow practitioners to use their First Amendment right to speak on whatever they think they need. The AVMA, though, as many of us would expect, are reading it in a little more narrow of terms. Their argument is that this covers speech, not conduct. So prescribing without an exam is still off the table. The Institute for Justice represented Hines, and it kind of gives you the idea here that they're not talking about just what's going on in a vet clinic, but they're really looking at a way to stand up for First Amendment rights. You should really care about this, right? The VCPR debate is one that we've been hearing back and forth on for years now. Kicked off in big sense in 2020 when we just wanted to be able to provide care however it was needed. But as those laws sort of changed and people were able to get back to the practice, we saw some of the language change and what people were saying maybe not have the same weight as it did before. Now the ruling here, or the lack of ruling, does not just blow open the doors. It just gives telemedicine providers kind of a precedent to point at. It tells them that they can say to boards across this country, hey, hold on. It's not just what you say, it's what people are also saying in the court system. So whether you're running a practice or building a telemedicine company or you're on one of the boards, the line between giving advice and providing care got a whole lot blurrier. This is one to keep up on and see how it goes and changes. I know some people are, taking this as their golden ticket to move forward on things, while others are just saying it's another day in the court system. So stay tuned to hear more about this. There's two new COOs and two incredible women that have stepped into these roles as well. First off, Vets Pets out of North Carolina announced Audrey Lisco as their new Chief Operating Officer. I had the wonderful opportunity to meet Audrey last week at a conference that I attended, and I was surprised. I said, "Hey, I haven't met you before." She said, "Didn't you read my press release?" Well, she caught me on a travel day, so I wanted to make sure that I got it here. Previously, Audrey had served as the Division Vice President for Unified Women's Healthcare, where she held a strategic and operational role managing over 100 private OBGYN practices across the country. She came right into the Vets Pets world and really fit in seamlessly. She was wonderful to chat with and seemed really excited to be able to bring some of that previous experience and learn a lot about what's going on in the vet world as well. So if Audrey reaches out to you, embrace her with open arms. She seems like a good one that we are happy to have joining the ranks here in the veterinary community. Next up, we had Dana McNabb, who has been promoted to the COO of General Mills. Now, that's a big one. General Mills, if you're wondering, Ryan, why are you bringing General Mills in this? Well, they own Blue Buffalo. You probably have seen those bags floating around. And Dana was previously in charge of running North American retail as well as North American pet. She's moved up and been promoted to this COO role and is going to continue growing the footprint across not only the North American market, but the global market for General Mills. So congratulations to both of these women on the big new roles, and look forward to seeing where you take your companies. If talking about the Supreme Court and some COOs wasn't government enough, why don't we talk about the first federal DEA regulations compliant digital controlled drug log software for veterinary practices? That's right. I'm talking about VetSnap. VetSnap had some really cool big news coming out this week. They have just launched their new 2-bay smart locker. It's a new way for practices with smaller inventories to be able to really lock down and control what's going on in those clinics. The team at VetSnap also has a 6-bay and a 14-bay locker, but this smaller one allows for lower volume inventories in tighter spaces to be able to place these around practices. It's a lot more compact, and it's something that the team has really been working on for a good amount of time. In their press release, the partner success coordinator, Courtney Van Doren, said more mobile veterinarians, boutique clinics, and satellite practices are becoming common, and some hospitals simply need controlled substance storage in multiple places within the practice. The 2-bay locker was built to support those different workflows, giving teams a more affordable way to improve DEA compliance without investing in large, expensive hardware. So congratulations to the team on launching that. I actually was chatting with the CEO of a large corporate group, multiple hundreds of practices into the almost thousands of practices. And he was telling me that he was sitting down and missed a session in the morning because he had to sit down with some doctors that had had an issue of some of these controlled substances sort of getting a little bit away from them. It was something that it ended up being just purely a misplaced issue versus an issue of loss. But this is kind of highlighting the fact here. You know, we talk about trying to find efficiencies and making these practices move faster, do more, and be more available. But a lot of that does require the teams to make sure that they're keeping their hands on everything. So I know the team at VetSnap do a fantastic job, and we'll be sure to see where this goes for them next. Finally, we hit on this in our Substack last week, but there were some big quarterly earnings reports that were announced. If you hadn't read the article in our Substack, be sure to check that one out. But the two big earnings reports that came out last week that tell kind of a different story between the industry were IDEXX and Zoetis. IDEXX took the opportunity to drop some major big win numbers. Their numbers were up across the board, while the numbers at Zoetis were, let's say, a little less exciting. IDEXX figures showed a 14% increase in revenue, which brought them to $1.4 billion of revenue. Their gross margin expanded to 63.4%, and they were able to show a major number of premium instruments placed. Last year, they put a little over 4,000, and in this report, they showed almost 4,700 premium instruments placed. Leading that was a lot of their catalyst and hematology tests, but their InView diagnostic machine had almost 1,100 placements. US clinic visits, as we know, did show as being down 2.1% in the quarter, but IDEXX still showed about a 12% increase in their organic growth. So growth for IDEXX while clinics are down. Now, Zoetis on the other side showed organic growth was flat, missing their overall targets there. Their gross margins dropped to 71% from 83% last year. And their US sales were down 8% and US companion animal sales were down 11%. It was a tough one to see, and a lot of that came from pressure on two of their big drugs, Covinia and Cerenia, which now have generic drugs that are on the market. They did see some bright spots where their cattle parasiticides got a boost from the New World screwworm response, but overall it was a shaky ground to see for people on there. Now, Zoetis is optimistic that their 2028 pipeline will be a big win here, but that is still quite a bit of time for them to figure out what to do. Overall, the two stocks were trading at some really interesting spots. IDEXX was trading about 46 times on their forward revenue estimates, while Zoetis trades at about 19x. There was sort of a split here in the way people were looking at the industry, and it's definitely one for us to keep our eyes on. More people put out quarterly earnings reports, and more things are happening across the market. So be sure to stay up to date, not only here, but also in our Substack, where we dig a little bit deeper into some of these stories. This episode of The Bird Bath is brought to you by the Bird Bath Terminal, the search engine for the US veterinary industry. If you ever tried to figure out who exactly owns a practice, how many DVMs they have, what their corporate parent is strategizing for their sites in your market, or where the next acquisition wave is headed, you know the data's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Spreadsheets from 2019, half-dead directory sites, and a friend of a friend who used to work there might know a guy that could point you in the right direction. Well, Terminal pulls it all into one place. Every US vet practice, every corporate group, every local roll-up, with the ownership, history, hiring signals, revenue estimates, and a contact layered data on top. Search it like Google, filter it like a CRM, and export it when you need to act on it. Whether you're scoping a market, building a recruiting pipeline, raising a fund, or running corporate strategy, it's the fastest way to go from a question to an answer. Head to thebirdbath.io/terminal to learn more, or click the link in our show notes. For more on these and other stories, join us by subscribing to our Substack. There's a link in the bio, and don't miss out on any episodes by subscribing and rating the show. For The Bird Bath, I'm Ryan Leach. See you next week.